So this question comes from @Heritage Dr. Pepper. And they actually asked a rather lengthy question, which was clarifying one of the points that I made in a previous video. So I'm just going to bypass that first paragraph because it's relatively lengthy. And the second part is actually relatively lengthy as well. So they said, personally, I'm only 4 weeks into a plan I'm following and already have to take a break because all of my joints hurt tremendously and the pain was only getting worse. I also upped the amount of weight I could move by 25 pounds during that time, but clearly my muscle growth far outran my tendons. 25 pounds on top of what you were doing is pretty solid gains, actually. I don't like slowing down without direction, so I'd actually be interested in understanding the correct pace of growth as well. I don't want to stagnate by repeating the exercises without progressing, but I also don't want to progress so quickly that my tendons and ligaments hate me for it, if this makes sense. It absolutely does, and we're going to cover how to make progress without pain in this video. Thank you for asking. You're 4 weeks into a plan, you've added 25 pounds onto what you were doing, but now you hurt. 25 pounds in a 4-week period is pretty solid gains, as I mentioned. And if you are in a rush, yeah, it's like that's pretty good. But what I like to do is I like to think long term, right? As a modern day professional performing strongman, it is not in my best interest to go into a show already in pain. And everything I want to do is about progress, right? So there's a couple, how to make progress without pain. There's actually a lot of different options that you would have to your disposal. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I think this is probably a big problem with people that are training, maybe even the biggest, is that you go into a gym, you go too hard, too soon, too fast. When you do that, you can make pretty quick gains at the beginning. They call them newbie gains. But then you hit a wall or a plateau. Now, plateaus, or what I like to call the wall, is the enemy of progress. And this could come in many different forms. This could come in the form of those governing mechanisms within our body that shut the process down to prevent you from destroying yourself. So with all of my programs that I do here in my gym, that I do for myself, as well as prescribe for my personal training clients, is I start with the end goal in mind, or the end in mind, knowing that each person in them has the power to lift a car of a human, right? There's been numerous times throughout history when ordinary people are able to spontaneously perform superhuman feats of strength when put into life and death situations. Some of these examples would be like mothers, like untrained women picking cars up off of kids, that sort of thing. Knowing that, that's actually what I started going to my mentors to learn about, was accessing this power. I wouldn't recommend that for most people, because what's often not talked about is why these governing mechanisms are in there in the first place. And it's like, yeah, you could bypass them to an extent, but you do so at your own risk. Many of the people that have performed those superhuman feats of strength and put into life and death situations have torn themselves apart, and they may never have recovered. That's because that potential to lift a car off of a human also has a potential to rip apart your tendons and bones, all of which you don't really want to mess with. I think a better way to do it is to build up the engine itself so it doesn't break under the load that is being asked of it. So that's one version of the wall, right? The other version would be what's known as the law of accommodation. Basically, what I'm talking about is the training process works like stimulus, recover, adapt, in that order. You provide a stimulus, your body thinks to itself, oh, this is something that I'm going to need to adapt to, so I better get get it together, and your body puts it together with a set principle, specific adaptations to impose demands, putting various structures in place in the forms of muscle growth, tendon growth, bone growth, central nervous system potentiation, a whole bunch of stuff like that. However, if the stimulus doesn't change at some point, with this law of accommodation that I mentioned, your body figures, whatever the heck this is, it's not going to kill me, so don't worry about it. And then it stops, and that's when you plateau. Now, partially what it sounds like is happening to you is that you did too much, too soon, too fast. Your muscle growth outran your tendon growth, and you're in pain. Pain, and like there's, sayings like pain is weakness leaving the body. That's actually a really dangerous statement, and it's not one that I support. Pain also inhibits motor unit recruitment. So you're actually going against it, against your own goals, right? Now, in order to actually make progress without those things happening, you're in luck because there are many different options to choose from. Some of the options that I like, I learned from Pavel Tsatsouline's books, right? If you took Power to the People by Pavel Tsatsouline and you read it, you would see some patterns of progression known as like periodization cycles, right? There's a couple different examples that he gives. One would be a linear periodization progression, which if you were to track the numbers, it would look something like this, going up in a line. It doesn't have to be that exact arc. It could even be this. And what you would do is, like, if this is the wall, you start back here, gain momentum, and you might end up here, right? In which case you do it again here. Or you could do something known as like a stair-step progression, which is like 3 workouts that don't change, and then on the 3rd workout, you add a little bit. 3 like that, 3 like that, 3 like that, 3 like that, or 4, or 5. Just try not to go more than 6 in a row, because approximately 6 exposures to the same stimulus, your body ceases to adapt, right? But it would go like that. That would be a way of pushing off the wall just a little bit farther. And another example of this would be like what would be considered a wave load, which might come in the form of like 2 steps or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, right? So it would go like this. But you notice with all of those things that I mentioned, you start here and it ends up here. That, my friend, is progress. And it might take 8 to 12 weeks in order to do that. It's okay. The game of strength is a game of patience. And if you really want to put pen to paper, you could kind of do some form of all 3 of those, changing like from like a linear periodization cycle to like a stair-step periodization cycle to a wave load, or even like a linear to a stair-step, wave load, linear, stair-step, wave load, some combination of all those things. They all will work to some extent. It kind of depends on how patient you are. Some of the other examples, if you don't have like a barbell, that's easiest to do with a barbell because the barbell is probably the most programmable. But if you were to do like ladders, like in Enter the Kettlebell by Pavel Tsatsouline, where you take a load that's like somewhat challenging and you just accumulate volume until you are at like 3 ladders of 5 rungs on your hard day, and then you reset the whole thing back to 3 ladders of 5 rungs on your heavy day, adding a rung or a ladder each week until you're strong. That's another way to do it. Another example might be like if you picked up the book Easy Strength by Dan John, that it also will work, right? Where you only add load when you're like absolutely comfortable with it. And if you look up, I think it's Insane Strength or something like that. It's a YouTube video here on YouTube, duh, if it's a YouTube video. But it's a video by Paul McElroy that he had done for someone's podcast, or it was supposed to be for a conference. I can't remember what it's called. But in it, he espouses his ideas when it comes to expanding your comfort zone. And he uses eccentrics as an example of some of these grids that he's talking about. That one is a bit more complicated, and I would recommend you really immersing yourself into the works of Pavel before you try to figure that one out. What else was I going to mention? Oh yeah, so a while back I set a goal for myself to do 50 consecutive pistol squats, and I utilized a wave loading principle that worked with volume instead of load, right? And I remember it was a 5-day-a-week program, and I like to call the technique 5 steps forward, 4 steps back, right? This was a way of keeping me well within my capabilities in order to expand my capabilities. And then I just made the jumps between the days bigger as the volume accumulated. But it worked. I was able to get 50 pistol squats, and that's actually kind of what got me on the map with Pavel Satsalin when I was assisting at one of the kettlebell certifications, and he asked me how I did it, and I said, ironically, I figured out how to put together this program just from reading the books that you had written, was what I told him. Also, one of the ones that I left out is The Naked Warrior by Pavel Satsalin. That one is actually a really brilliant book involving synaptic facilitation, or grease the groove. And it's like, if you really want to learn about like an ethos when it comes to strength programming, I highly recommend that book. Even if you don't intend to follow the program, it at least pays to learn about the program and why it works. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you out. I hope you're able to make progress without pain. If you like this video, let me know by hitting that like button. If you want to see more of this sort of thing, or you want to see the chronicles from my various performances across the country, subscribe to the channel. If you think anybody should see this, please share it with them. This YouTube thing isn't rocket science, and if you want to support the channel, do all the things I just mentioned, or you could pick up a copy of my book. Link is in the description below, or you could pick up some coffee from Good For You Coffee Club, in which case use the promo code MyPower10 to save 10% off of every purchase that you use that promo code for. But that's it for today. Please stay tuned for next time, and in the meantime, please stay happy, healthy, and strong. Eric Moss, over and out.